Welcome, everybody. Today we will finish chapter 4, uh, Cain and Abel and their sacrifice. This is the last chapter of the series. If you want me to make anything specific, please just write it down in the comments. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will it not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out in the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Now, why was the offering that Cain did not acceptable to God? Well, if we read carefully, it says that Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil, and they brought both an offering. But if we remember on Genesis 1 about the creation of the earth, God created on the third day plants, on the fifth day in the morning fish, on the fifth day in the evening birds, and on the sixth day in the morning animals, and the sixth day in the evening humans. So when Cain brought his offering, he was bringing something that was of the lowest value, which is plants. And Abel was bringing something of the highest value, which was made on the same day as humans, which is animals. They are not equal to humans, but they serve as a stand in for humans. If you remember when we were speaking in the previous chapters about how God made clothes of animal skins and put them on Adam and Eve when they went out of the garden. Remember, Adam and Eve had also covered themselves with plants, but God, in God's eyes, they were still naked. A plant couldn't cover them. So he made these coverings of animals. Now, Cain and Abel, they should have known this, and Cain should have known what was acceptable to God as a sacrifice. But instead, he let sin rule over him, and he killed his brother. Now we have another example in the Bible, and we can read about Abraham and Isaac. Genesis 22, 1 to 3, 1 to 13. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to Abraham, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Now, you say this is very cruel from God, because of course we're doing this series for new Christians and you think this is cruel, but the Bible explains what was going on in Abraham's mind. Hebrews 11:19 says that Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive his son, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. So in Abraham's mind, he was going to sacrifice his son, but God would bring him back to life, because God had promised that through Isaac, Abraham would be a father of nations. Genesis 22:9, we continue. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood in it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on the top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there is in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its thorns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will provide. So Abraham is very, we need to notice here that many times it's mentioned that it's Abraham's only son. And when we read about Jesus, he is God's only son. So God tested Abraham and saw if he was willing to sacrifice his only son. God didn't demand that from him at the end because he found something to replace that sacrifice. But God did actually sacrifice his only son, Jesus Christ, for us. Now, what did Abraham find in the thicket? Was it plants, leaves? Was it a bird? No, it was a ram, a land animal. And that was an acceptable substitute for Isaac. Now, the problem is that these sacrifices, they didn't remove the sin. They didn't forgive the sin. They just cover it temporarily. In Hebrews 10, 3-4, it says, but those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sin. It is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. So these sacrifices that all the people of Israel had done to this time, until the time of Jesus, they couldn't remove sin. They could only cover it for a time. And remember, there was a sin that was committed in the beginning that had not been paid for. In Genesis 2:17, if we remember, God said, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. So this was said to Adam and Eve, that they would certainly die if they ate from the fruit. They did eat from the fruit, and they didn't die immediately, because God had a plan of redemption, and he provided substitutes for them. Hebrews 10:8-10 says, first he said, sacrifice and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them, though they were offered in accordance with the law. Then he said, here I am, I have come to do your will. He set aside the first to establish the second, and by that will we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. So these bull sacrifice, lamb sacrifices, God did not desire. It was not sufficient to cover for the sin. There needed to come a person to stand in place of the sin that Adam and Eve and all mankind did until this time. And so it was written, and Jesus said, here I am, I have come to do your will. And Jesus was born into this earth to provide an acceptable sacrifice that will forgive, finally, sin. And 1 John 4:9-11, it says, this is how God showed he lived among us. He sent his one and only Son, just like with Abraham, into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we ought to love one another. So this is the final atoning sacrifice for our sin, Jesus Christ, the one who is perfect, the one who is mankind to pay for the sins of mankind, but without any blemish or sin in his own life, the only sacrifice that is acceptable to God. And with this, guys, we finish our series. If you would like me to make any special video, please write to me in the comments. I am willing to do it. God bless you.